I don't really know how to talk about this. I've started maybe 4 times now, and I keep stopping because it sounds insane, and it is insane, but it also happened. So, I guess start with the motel. That's where everything kind of settled in, became real, or became the version of real I'm apparently living with now. The place was called the Ridgeline Motor Lodge. It sat about 4 miles outside of Ash Creek, Montana, right off a state route that I couldn't even tell you the number of anymore. Something in the 200s. 2 lanes, no shoulder to speak of. Pine trees so close on both sides that your headlights just got eaten about 30 feet in. Like the forest was politely refusing to acknowledge the road existed. And look, I wasn't exactly in a position to be choosy about anything at that point. My ex-wife got the apartment in Billings. I got the truck and about $1,100 in a checking account that was bleeding out every time I stopped for gas or a sandwich. I hadn't talked to my brother in actually, I don't even know how long. 2 years? Longer maybe. My mom was in assisted living outside Bozeman, and half the time she thought I was my cousin Gary when I called. So when I saw the listing, night desk clerk, motel, room included, I didn't research it, didn't Google the town, didn't ask questions. Honestly, I probably would have taken anything at that point. The motel just happened to answer first. That's not a brave story. It's not even an interesting one. I was broke and tired, and I needed a door I could close behind me, and this one came with a paycheck. That was October, late October, I think. The mountains already had snow on them, but the roads were still mostly clear. Barely. I remember pulling off the highway, and my first thought wasn't that Ash Creek was creepy or strange or any of the things you'd expect me to say. It just looked paused. Not abandoned, there were trucks parked outside houses, smoke from a couple chimneys, a dog lying on someone's porch, but paused. Like everyone had collectively agreed to stay very, very still for a while, and just hadn't gotten around to moving again. The motel itself was one of those long, single-story buildings, 12 rooms, maybe 14. I never actually counted, which seems like something I should have done at some point, but never got around to. Pale yellow paint that had gone gray in most places, a gravel lot with weeds pushing through, and a sign out front that buzzed with that specific shade of orange neon that makes everything look like it's permanently 1987. The office was at the far end, attached to a small apartment, which was mine, apparently. The whole thing smelled like dust and heating oil and old carpet. The owner was a guy named Dale. 60s, maybe. Hard to tell. He had that kind of face that looked like it had been 55 for about 20 years and just decided to stay there. Flannel shirt, Carhartt vest that was more stained than vest at this point. Boots that had seen actual mud, not the kind you buy pre-scuffed at a department store. He showed me around in about 4 minutes. Front desk. Cash register, which was basically a metal lockbox with a broken latch. Key rack, half the hooks empty. Ice machine that worked sometimes. Vending machine with Dr. Pepper and those orange crackers that taste like compressed sawdust. Most nights you won't get more than 2-3 guests, he said. Truckers, mostly. Sometimes someone headed to Glacier who missed their turn and doesn't want to keep driving. He was perfectly nice, calm, unhurried in a way that felt less like patience and more like conservation. But he had this thing, I noticed it right away, where he'd start a sentence and then just stop, like he was editing himself in real time, swallowing the second half. The apartment's got heat, he told me, Baseboards. They work fine through January usually. After that, it gets... He looked at the wall for a second, blinked. They work fine. I didn't push. I didn't push on anything back then. I was too tired to push. The first few nights were exactly what you'd expect from a motel in the middle of nowhere in late October. Quiet. Unbelievably, aggressively quiet. I'd sit at the front desk from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and maybe one set of headlights would sweep across the parking lot. Maybe none. I'd read whatever paperbacks someone had left in a room. I'd scroll my phone until the signal dropped, which happened constantly, like the valley itself had bad reception as a personality trait. I'd make coffee in the little 4-cup machine behind the desk that tasted like it was brewing through a filter made of dust and regret. But it was hot. That counted for something. Ash Creek itself I only saw during the daytime at first. I'd drive in for groceries or to eat at this place called Marlowe's, which was less of a diner and more of a large kitchen that someone had bolted a counter and 6 stools onto. Formica countertop, cracked in 2 places. Ceiling fan that wobbled. But good coffee. Really good coffee, actually. The kind where you can tell someone is cleaning the pot between batches instead of just topping it off. The town was small. Not charming small. Not quirky small. Tired small. There was a hardware store that seemed to sell mostly rope and duct tape. A post office crammed inside a gas station. A volunteer fire department with 1 engine and a garage door that stuck halfway. And a church with a steeple that leaned slightly to the left, like it had tried to stand up straight years ago and just given up. Most of the buildings were wood frame. Most of the trucks were 10+ years old. And most of the people had a way of being friendly without actually being warm. Polite. Practiced. Like they'd all independently arrived at the exact right amount of conversation to have with a stranger and stuck to it like a budget. I didn't mind. After Billings, after the divorce, after all the arguments that ended with both of us sitting in different rooms, staring at our phones, pretending the other person didn't exist, the silence felt almost medicinal. Like my brain was finally allowed to stop performing for an audience. I think it was my 5th or 6th night, Wednesday, probably, because the garbage truck came through that morning, and it only ran Wednesdays when the heat became a problem. The baseboards worked. Dale was right about that. But they worked the way a drunk uncle works at Thanksgiving. Inconsistently, and with a lot of alarming noise. Some nights they barely ran. Other nights they cranked so hard, the apartment felt like the inside of a clothes dryer. That Wednesday was a drier night. I couldn't sleep, lying on top of the covers in a t-shirt. The room smelled like hot dust and old carpet. The window, one of those aluminum frame sliders from the 70s, was painted shut. Or I thought it was. I messed with it for a minute, wiggling the frame, and it popped loose with a crack of old paint. I slid it open about 6 inches. The air that came in was perfect, cold and clean, and it smelled like pine and wet gravel and something faintly mineral, like cold rocks. I remember thinking, I specifically remember this, finally, something in this place that actually works in my favor. I was out within 2 minutes. Deep, heavy, dreamless sleep. The knocking woke me up. Not loud. Not aggressive. 3 soft knocks on the apartment door. The kind of knock you'd use if you were embarrassed to be bothering someone. The kind that comes with a wince. I checked my phone. 12:40 a.m. I got up, pulled on jeans, didn't bother with shoes, and opened the door. It was a woman I'd seen at Marlowe's once or twice. Mid-40s maybe, short hair going gray at the temples, work jacket with a county logo on it. The kind of tired face that comes from raising kids alone in a place with one grocery store and not enough daylight in winter. She was standing on the gravel with her arms crossed, not like she was angry, but like she was cold or uncomfortable, probably both. "Hey," she said. "Sorry, I know it's late. I saw your window was open." I stared at her. "Yeah, the heat's." "I know. Dale's baseboards." She almost laughed. Didn't. "You're going to want to close that, though." "The window?" "Yeah." I waited for her to keep going. She didn't. She just stood there, looking at a spot somewhere past my left shoulder. "Is there a smell or something? Gas leak?" No, nothing like that. Just, most people keep them closed. After 12, especially. It's what people do here. Most people close their windows before midnight? "Mm-hmm." She said goodnight. Walked to her truck, a tan Chevy, older model, rust on the wheel wells. Drove away, gravel popping under her tires like small bones. I stood there for a while. Then I closed the window. Not because I believed anything was wrong, but because it was almost 1 a.m, and a stranger had driven to my door to politely ask me, and something about the way she said it, the complete absence of drama, the practiced flatness, made it feel less like paranoia and more like practical advice, like telling someone not to leave food in their car because of bears. Not scary, just local. I brought it up to Dale the next morning, trying to be casual, pouring coffee, not looking at him. "Hey, someone came by last night and told me to keep my windows closed." Dale was wiping down the front counter. He didn't stop wiping. "Yeah, that's just a thing around here." "What kind of thing?" He put the rag down. Looked at me with this expression I've thought about probably 100 times since then. It wasn't evasive exactly. It was more like he was running a calculation. How much to say? How much effort this conversation was worth? Like a mechanic deciding whether to explain the whole transmission problem or just say it needs fluid and save everyone 20 minutes. "Gets cold at night," he said, "and sounds carry weird in the valley. Guests sleep better with the windows shut." That was it. He picked the rag back up, started wiping in the same circles. I let it go. Figured it was one of those small-town things that doesn't need to make sense to outsiders. Like how certain rural neighborhoods all paint their fences the same color without anyone remembering who started it. A habit that outlived its explanation. But I started watching. Not deliberately at first. I just noticed things during my night shifts. From the front desk, I could see part way down the road toward the first cluster of houses. Every single night, every night, somewhere between 11:30 and midnight, things would change. Porch lights clicking off, not all at once. In a slow wave, house by house, like a whispered instruction traveling down the road. Screen doors closing, one after another. The distant yellow squares of lit windows blinking out until the whole road was just dark. Completely, uniformly dark. And then the quiet would change. I don't know how to describe this without sounding dramatic, but I'm not being dramatic. There's regular nighttime quiet crickets, wind, a dog, maybe a truck gear shifting on the highway a few miles off. Alive sounds. And then there's what Ash Creek became after midnight. Heavier, thicker. Like the air itself was holding still on purpose, like everything with instincts had simultaneously decided to stop making noise. The first time I really noticed it, I was outside the office having a cigarette. I'd picked it back up after the divorce, which, yeah, I know. I was leaning against the wall, and I realized I couldn't hear anything. Not the highway, not the wind, not even the electrical hum from the motel's neon sign, which had been buzzing all night. It was like someone pressed mute on the entire valley. Not silence, exactly. Silence is the absence of sound. This felt like the presence of something else, something that replaced sound. It lasted maybe 10 minutes. Then the wind came back, tentative, like it was checking whether it was allowed. A dog barked somewhere far off. The neon sign resumed its buzz, and everything felt normal again. I told myself it was a weather thing. Temperature inversions. Montana valleys do that, trap cold air, create weird acoustic pockets. That's a real thing. I looked it up on my phone when I had signal. It's real. The next few weeks went by, slow and gray. November crept in. The snow started sticking. I fell into a routine that was almost comfortable in its emptiness. Sleep until 3 or 4. Drive to Marlowe's. Sit at the counter and listen without being expected to contribute. Back to the motel by 9. Shift by 10. Coffee. Silence. Maybe a trucker. Dawn. Repeat. There were days I didn't speak more than 40 words total. The regulars at Marlowe's started acknowledging me. Not warmly, just a nod. Jan from the post office would make small talk about the weather in that way people do when weather is the only safe subject. Heck, which I assumed was short for something, but never confirmed, and honestly, might have just been. Heck would sit next to me at the counter and talk about nothing. Fishing, the cost of propane. Whether the county would ever fix the pothole on Route 214 or just let it evolve into a sinkhole. Normal stuff. Painfully, aggressively normal. But every now and then, a conversation would bump against something invisible, and the energy in the room would shift, not dramatically. Nothing you could point to and say, "That was weird." More like watching someone step on a crack in the sidewalk and correct their balance so fast you'd miss it if you blinked. One morning I mentioned to Heck that I'd been hearing a sound at night. Not anything specific, more of a low hum, like a diesel engine idling, but in the wrong direction. Not from the highway, from the mountains. Heck was mid-bite on a piece of toast. He chewed, swallowed, took a sip of coffee. I watched his jaw tighten. For just a half second. "Wind does weird things in the valley," he said. "It doesn't really sound like wind, though. It does weird things." Same sentence, same intonation. He didn't even rephrase it. Then he asked if I'd tried the pie. I hadn't. I ordered a slice. We didn't talk about the sound again. Another time, maybe a week later, I asked Jan at the post office if there was a mill or factory running at night. Something that might explain the hum, or the way the air sometimes carried a faint metallic smell around 2 or 3 a.m. Like cold copper, like the inside of a well. She looked at me over her reading glasses. There used to be a sawmill up past Ridger Road, but that closed in '08. So nothing running overnight? Not that I know of. She stamped a package. Then, quieter, almost an afterthought, like she was reminding herself of something. "You're keeping your windows closed, though, right?" "Yeah." "Good." She smiled. A real smile. Small. Warm. Genuine. Just a middle-aged woman in a post office smiling at someone who'd given the right answer on a test he didn't know he was taking. And somehow that was worse than anything. Around mid-November, I started noticing the kids. There weren't many, maybe a dozen school-age kids in the whole town, but the ones I saw behaved differently than kids in any other place I'd lived. Not scared, exactly. Just trained. I watched a boy, maybe 8 or 9, riding his bike past the motel one afternoon. It was getting dark, not late, maybe 4:30, and he stopped pedaling, checked his watch, and immediately turned around. No hesitation, no reluctance, like a migrating bird responding to a signal I couldn't detect. At Marlowe's, I once saw 2 girls' sisters, probably sitting in a booth doing homework, while their mother talked to someone at the counter. When the clock on the wall hit 5 o'clock, both girls simultaneously, and I mean at the exact same moment, started packing their backpacks without being told. The mother didn't even look over. She just said to whoever she was talking to, "Well, better get going." And that was that. Kids shouldn't know routines like that. Not unless the routines matter in a way that makes forgetting them unthinkable. December came in hard. The kind of cold that makes your truck groan when you start it and turns your breath into something almost solid. The motel got even quieter. Some weeks I'd go 4 or 5 nights without a single guest. Just me and the humming ice machine and the orange glow of the parking lot lights reflecting off snow. I started spending more time outside at night. Not far, just the front steps or the edge of the parking lot. Smoking, watching the dark. I told myself it was boredom. Mostly it was. But there was a pull, too. Not toward anything specific. Just a feeling that if I watched long enough, the town would accidentally show me the thing it had all agreed not to talk about. It was around this time that I found the guest book, not the current one. Dale kept a spiral notebook behind the desk for check-ins, nothing fancy. I found an older one, in a box in the storage closet, while I was looking for light bulbs. A hardbound ledger, green cover, water-stained. The entries started in 1986. Most of it was normal. Names, dates, license plates, room numbers, but scattered through the margins, in different handwriting, different pens, different decades were notes. Small ones, the kind a clerk leaves for the next shift. Remind guests' windows. Room 9 guest left window cracked, addressed. Windy tonight, extra locks. And one near the back, shaky handwriting. Dated November 1989. Kept windows shut. It still knew which room. I put the book back in the box. I didn't tell Dale I'd found it, but that night I couldn't sleep. And instead of doing what a normal person would do, which is leave, or at least ask someone directly, I did what I think most people actually do when they're confronted with something impossible. I tried to prove it wasn't happening. I spent 3 days on my phone during shifts, searching everything I could think of. Infrasound. I read about infrasound for hours. Apparently, certain geological formations can produce low-frequency vibrations that cause anxiety, nausea, visual disturbances. There are documented cases. Factories, wind turbines, even ocean waves can generate infrasound that makes people feel watched, feel dread, see things in their peripheral vision that aren't there. I read that, and I felt genuinely relieved. For about 40 minutes. Then I looked up sleep deprivation. Chronic sleep disruption can cause auditory hallucinations, pattern recognition errors, paranoid ideation. I was working nights. I was barely sleeping. I was isolated, recently divorced, emotionally compromised. I was a textbook case for perceptual distortion. I almost convinced myself. I sat at the desk one night with an article about electromagnetic hypersensitivity open on my phone, and I thought, this is it. This is the explanation. The old electrical wiring in the motel, the transformer on the pole outside, the geological composition of the valley. It's all just physics and bad sleep, and a lonely brain looking for patterns. I felt so relieved, I almost laughed. Then the porch lights on the road started clicking off in sequence, and the quiet came, and I closed the article and put my phone face down on the desk and didn't look at it again until morning. Infrasound doesn't make an entire town lock its doors at the same time every night. Sleep deprivation doesn't leave entries in a guest book from 1989. Mid-December. Clear night, which was rare. Stars so thick and layered and close, it looked like the atmosphere had thinned out just to show off. Light snow on the ground, maybe 2 inches. Everything absolutely still. I was standing at the edge of the parking lot around 1:15 a.m. with a cigarette, looking at the field across the road. Flat. Dead grass poking through snow. Beyond it, the tree line a wall of black pine like a curtain drawn across the edge of the world. Something was wrong with part of the tree line. I didn't see anything arrive. Nothing moved. It was more like when you're staring at one of those optical illusion images and suddenly the hidden shape resolves. It was like that. One section of darkness at the edge of the trees was behaving differently than the rest. Denser, more deliberate. The snow on the ground near it looked dimmer, like the moonlight was being absorbed before it could reflect. I stood there for probably 2 full minutes, not breathing right, trying to convince myself it was a shadow or a trick of the starlight. But I'd looked at that field every single night for weeks. I knew it the way you know your own kitchen counter. There was nothing at that tree line. Then, the pressure changed, in my ears, like descending in an airplane, except it came from outside, from the direction of the field, and the snow between me and the trees seemed to flatten not from wind. There was no wind. It compressed in a line, like something very heavy was redistributing itself. And whatever was wrong at the tree line was now wrong about 10 feet closer to the road. It hadn't walked, hadn't stepped. The darkness just disagreed with itself in a different location. I went inside, locked the door, closed every window, turned the TV on just static, because the cable didn't work half the time, and sat on the bed with every light on until the sun came up. The thing I remember most about that night, and I know this is stupid, but it's what my brain held on to, is that the vending machine in the hallway was humming a slightly different note than usual, like it had shifted down a half step. I sat there on the bed, terrified. And that's the detail my mind decided to catalog. Not the field, not the darkness, the pitch of a vending machine. I don't know why that's what I remember, but it is. At some point around 4 a.m., the pressure in my ears released, like a valve opening. The neon sign outside, which had been flickering in a slow, almost rhythmic pattern for 2 hours, steadied. I felt my jaw unclench for the first time and realized I'd been grinding my teeth. The next morning I went to Marlowe's, sat at the counter, didn't say anything for a long time. Marlowe herself, heavy-set, 60s, moved like she was perpetually annoyed at gravity, brought me coffee without asking, set the mug down, stood there a second, dish towel over her shoulder, not quite looking at me. I wanted to say something. I wanted to ask. But I looked around the diner at Heck reading the paper, at Jan's husband buttering toast with mechanical precision, at 2 guys in county works jackets discussing a water main with the kind of intensity people usually reserve for things that actually matter. And I understood something I'd been actively refusing to understand for weeks. They all already knew. Every single one of them. They knew what was in the field. They knew what the pressure was. They knew why the windows stayed shut, and the porch lights went dark, and conversations veered away from certain words like cars avoiding a sinkhole. They knew. And they had decided collectively, calmly, without a meeting or a vote or an announcement, that the correct response was to simply keep living, to keep eating toast, to keep discussing water mains, to keep the volume of daily life turned up just loud enough to cover the silence underneath. I opened my mouth to say something to Marlo. I don't even know what. And she looked at me. Just looked at me. Not threatening, not warning, almost sympathetic. Like she remembered the exact moment she'd felt what I was feeling years ago, and she was genuinely sorry I'd gotten there. Then she glanced at the clock. 11:42 a.m. She walked to the front of the diner, lowered the blinds on the big window facing the street, and walked back. "More coffee?" she said. "Yeah," I said. "Please." She poured. Outside, I heard the hardware store owner pull his front door shut and latch it, even though his posted hours said he was open until noon. Nobody acknowledged it. The conversation about the water main continued without a pause. After that, things started clicking into place in a way I didn't want them to. I started noticing the infrastructure, not of the town of the adaptation. The motel windows all had secondary latches that Dale had installed himself. You could see the mismatched screws, the drill holes that didn't quite line up. Every room had blackout curtains, the heavy kind, the kind with the rubber backing that blocks everything. Not the flimsy hotel ones that let in a stripe of parking lot light. The office had a steel-reinforced back door that was wildly, absurdly overkill for a 12-room motel in rural Montana. I'd assumed it was left over from a previous owner's paranoia. Now I wasn't sure paranoia was the right word. In town, things were similar. Most houses had their ground floor windows covered with something extra storm shutters, plywood backing painted to match the siding, thick curtains visible from outside that never seemed to open even during the day. Jan's post office had steel mesh over the windows. She'd told me once it was because of hail. I'd nodded. "Hail doesn't come sideways, Jan." But I'd nodded. Marlowe's had those rolling security shutters, the kind you see on storefronts in cities, in neighborhoods where people bolt things down. She pulled them down every night at exactly 10 p.m. Not 10:05, not 9:55, 10. I watched her do it once from across the street. She didn't rush. She didn't look around nervously. She just pulled them down, the way you'd draw a bath. Routine, muscle memory, something she'd done so many times it had worn a groove into her evening. The volunteer fire department had a schedule posted inside on the corkboard. I saw it once when I dropped off a bag of old clothes, trying to be a good neighbor, or at least trying to perform being one. The schedule showed normal shift rotations, but there was a column on the far right that just said overnight, with names filled in. Every single night. 7 days a week. A town this size doesn't need 24-hour fire coverage. They barely needed a fire department. But someone was always there, awake, between midnight and dawn. And the engine was always parked facing outward, toward the road. Ready. I noticed something else about the fire station. The bay door had scratches on it, deep ones. Not at handle height, higher, much higher. They'd been painted over, more than once from the look of it, but the gouges were deep enough that the paint just settled into them like scar tissue. I stopped asking about things after that. Not a conscious decision. More like my brain quietly closed a door and suggested I focus on something else. I started keeping my own patterns. Door locked by 11:30. Windows sealed. Curtains drawn all the way, no gaps. TV on low. Volume just enough to fill the room without covering outside sounds. I stopped going out after midnight entirely. Not because Dale told me to. Not because anyone sat me down and had a conversation. My body just decided. The way your hand pulls back from a hot stove before your brain catches up. I started checking windows compulsively. Not just mine, the motel rooms. After a guest checked out, the first thing I'd do before stripping beds, before checking for damage, was check the window latches. Both of them. If one was loose, I'd tighten it with a screwdriver I started carrying in my back pocket. I didn't think about why I was doing it. It just felt necessary. Like locking your car in a parking lot. You just do it. Christmas came and went. I called my mom. She called me Gary for most of it. I said, "It's me, Mom," twice, and then just let it go and talked to her as Gary. She seemed happier that way. I called my ex-wife to say Merry Christmas and got voicemail. Didn't leave a message. What would I say? Hey, I'm living in a motel in Montana where everyone locks their doors at sundown and nobody will tell me why. She already thought I was falling apart. No need to confirm it. I ate a turkey sandwich from Marlowe's and watched snow fall on the parking lot and felt the kind of loneliness that doesn't ache anymore because it's calcified. Turn structural. Become part of the architecture of who you are, like a wall you built so long ago you forgot. It wasn't always there. January was the worst month. Not because of what happened, though things happened. January was the worst because I'd started accepting things I hadn't agreed to accept, adapting to conditions I'd never been briefed on, following rules nobody had written down. The hum became almost nightly, sometimes low and steady, like a transformer straining under a load it wasn't designed for. Other times, it had a rhythm almost like breathing, if breathing could travel through the ground and settle into the soles of your boots and the base of your skull simultaneously. I'd feel it in my teeth, a looseness, like they were vibrating at a frequency just below what my ears could register. And the shapes. I stopped using that word, actually, because shapes implies something with edges, something you could draw. What I saw from the office window on certain nights was more like the darkness in the field, disagreeing with itself. Parts of it thicker than they should be. Parts of it refusing to behave the way the rest of the darkness was behaving. Sometimes at the tree line, sometimes at the far edge of the field. Once, I think, on the roof of an old barn about a quarter-mile east, though it was snowing sideways that night, and I could have been wrong. I wanted to be wrong. They never moved while I was looking directly at them. Only in the periphery. Only in the corner of my eye, where the brain fills in details it probably shouldn't. And they never came onto the road, never into the parking lot. Like there was a line, an agreement. One night in late January, the neon sign outside started flickering in a pattern. Not randomly, rhythmically. 3 short flickers. Pause. 3 short flickers. Pause. Over and over. I watched it from the desk for almost 20 minutes, trying to convince myself it was an electrical fault. Then the ice machine in the hallway powered down. Then the baseboard heaters in the apartment clicked off, one by one, in sequence, like someone was walking through the building, flipping breakers. But the lights stayed on. The TV stayed on. Just the things that made noise went quiet. And in the silence that followed, I could hear the hum clearly for the first time. not feel it, hear it. Low and vast, and coming from everywhere and nowhere, like the valley itself was resonating. Then everything clicked back on. Ice machine, heaters, the neon sign steadied. And outside, very faintly, I heard what sounded like something large settling its weight onto frozen ground. Far away, but not far enough. A trucker pulled in around 1 a.m. on a night in late January. Big rig, out of State Plates, Nebraska, I think. He came into the office stamping snow off his boots. Big guy, red face, John Deere cap, pulled low. "Need a room," he said. "Heater in the cab's acting up." I checked him in. Room 6, handed him the key. "Windows stay closed," I said. I didn't think about it. It just came out. The same flat, casual tone, the same non-explanation, like telling someone ice machines around the corner or checkouts at 11. Dale's exact words in my mouth, and something very small and very important broke inside me when I heard them. The trucker gave me a look. "What?" "The windows. Just keep them shut overnight. Gets cold and sounds carry weird." I almost said "in the valley." Dale's full sentence. I caught myself. He shrugged. "Sure thing, boss." He went to his room. 20 minutes later, I saw the light in room 6 go on, then off. Then I heard it faintly, but unmistakably, the aluminum scrape of a window sliding open. I sat behind the desk staring at the key rack, feeling my pulse in my throat. Part of me wanted to go over there. Part of me wanted to not be the person who knocks on doors at 1 in the morning to say cryptic things about windows. I understood fully, physically understood how the woman who'd come to my door back in October must have felt. The awkwardness, the embarrassment, how insane it sounds. How you can't explain it because the explanation isn't a sentence, it's 6 months of living here. I went. 3 soft knocks. Room 6. He opened the door in his undershirt. "Hey, sorry, the window." "What about it?" "You really want to keep it closed." He stared at me the exact way I'd stared at that woman. I could see myself in his face, the confusion, the mild irritation, the beginning of a story he'd tell someone later about the weird motel clerk in Montana. "Man, it's like 80 degrees in here. The heat's cranked to hell." "I know, but trust me on this one. Close it." Something in my voice, or my face. He looked at me for a long second, then reached back and slid the window shut. The latch clicked. "Weird town," he said. "Yeah," I said, "it is." He was gone by 6 a.m. I hope he forgot about it. I hope it became a funny story he told once at a truck stop and never thought about again. That's the best version of what happened to him. The version where Ash Creek was just a weird night in a weird place and nothing more. February broke the rhythm. We had a storm. A real one. Not Montana winter normal. Apocalyptic. The sky went white and stayed white for 3 days. Wind that sounded like it was trying to disassemble the building from the outside in. Power went out across the entire town early on the second night. The motel ran on a backup generator diesel, military surplus, something Dale had installed years ago in the mechanical closet behind the office. It kept the lights and the desk lamp going, barely. Everything else was dark. I was alone. No guests. The generator chugged, the wind screamed, and underneath both sounds, steady and patient and completely indifferent to the storm, the hum was there. Louder than I'd ever heard it. Not vibrating through the floor anymore, through the walls, through the desk. The coffee in my mug was trembling. Little concentric circles on the surface, perfectly symmetrical, like something was tapping a tuning fork against the foundation of the building. The power being out meant the town's lights were off. All of them. Every porch light, every street light, every amber security lamp on the fire department and the hardware store and Jan's post office. The entire visible grid was black. And it hit me, maybe for the first time clearly, that all of those lights weren't just for the residents. They were part of the system, the boundary, the perimeter, the routine, whatever you want to call the thing Ash Creek had built around itself over God knows how many years. The lights were part of it, and the boundary was down. I heard something outside the office, not the wind, under the wind, a sound like heavy fabric being dragged slowly across frozen gravel. Then a pause. Then again, closer. I didn't look. I sat behind the desk. I stared at the wall. I listened. The dragging sound circled the building, slowly, patiently. It moved along the east wall, around the back, past the apartment, along the west side, back to the front, a full loop, unhurried, like it was taking inventory. Then it did it again. On the third loop, it stopped, right outside the office door. The generator chugged. The wind threw snow against the windows. And on the other side of a wooden door, with a deadbolt that suddenly felt like it was made of wet cardboard, something stood in the storm and waited. It didn't knock. It didn't try the handle. It didn't make a sound. It just waited. Like it was confirming something, checking whether the routine was still in place, whether the doors were still locked, whether the agreement, whatever the agreement, was still held. I don't know how long it stayed. 10 minutes. 20. Long enough for my legs to go completely numb from sitting rigid. Long enough for the cold sweat on my back to dry and return twice. Long enough for me to memorize every scratch and nail hole in the wall I was staring at, because I absolutely was not going to look at that door. Then, and this is the part I still think about, every house in Ash Creek that I could see from the office window lit up. One light per house, simultaneously. In the pitch black, dead power, middle of a blizzard darkness, every single house turned on one light. Not electricity, the power was still out. Flashlights maybe, lanterns, candles, I don't know. But they appeared in the windows all at once, like a signal, like a roll call. They stayed on for maybe 30 seconds. Then they all went dark again. Every one. Same moment. And the dragging sound outside my door moved away. Back across the gravel. Back toward the field. Slowly. Like it wasn't afraid. Like it was never afraid. Like it had simply received the information it needed and was done. I sat in that chair until dawn. At least, I think I did. Here's the thing I haven't said yet, because I don't know what to do with it. When the sun finally came up that morning, gray and weak through the snow, I was sitting in the chair. Same position, same place. But my boots were by the door. My boots, which I hadn't been wearing, which had been in the apartment. By the bed. They were by the office door. And they were wet. Not damp from the floor wet. Wet like they'd been outside. The soles had gravel pressed into them. Fresh gravel. There was a thin line of mud on the floor between the door and where they sat, like someone had carried them in and set them down carefully. The deadbolt on the office door was unlocked. I don't remember unlocking it. I don't remember putting on my boots. I don't remember going outside, but I also can't say for certain that I didn't. There's about 2 hours between maybe 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. that aren't in my memory. Not blacked out, not fuzzy, just absent, like a page that was never written. I was sitting in the chair at 2:45, staring at the wall. And then it was 5:10, and my neck was stiff, and my boots were across the room, and the door was unlocked. I checked the gravel outside. The snow was churned up near the entrance, but so was everything after a storm like that. I couldn't tell what was wind and what was footprints. I locked the door again. I put the boots back by the bed. I never mentioned it to anyone. But some nights, when the hum gets loud and my ears start to pressurize, I wonder if I went outside, and I wonder what I was doing, and I wonder if I was alone. The power came back the next afternoon. Dale drove out to check the generator. I almost told him. I had the words assembled. I was going to say, "Dale, what the hell is out there?" And I was going to stand there and not move until he gave me a real answer. But when he walked in, stomping snow off his boots, he just looked at me and said, "Everything hold up okay?" And I knew what he was really asking. Not about the pipes, not about the generator. He was asking if the locks held, if I'd kept everything sealed, if the routine had survived the blackout. "Yeah," I said, "everything held up fine." He nodded, slowly, almost like he was relieved, but didn't want to show it. "Good. Storm's clearing tonight. Should be a quiet week." He left. I made coffee. The neon sign buzzed back to life outside. The field across the road was a blank white page of fresh snow with nothing in it, and it looked completely, absolutely harmless. I stayed in Ash Creek through March, then April. The snow melted, and the days got longer, and the nights shrank, and the hum faded to something I could almost pretend was distant wind, or a transformer, or my own blood pressure in my ears. Summer was close to normal. Windows still closed at night, but the urgency felt different, softer. Whatever moved through the dark around Ash Creek seemed seasonal, or cyclical, or responsive to something I didn't understand and had stopped trying to. The town relaxed a fraction of a degree. Marlowe's stayed open until 11 some nights. People lingered on their porches after sunset. Heck went night fishing at the reservoir, though he always packed up well before midnight, and he always kept his truck running on the bank with the headlights pointed at the water. He never fished facing away from the lights. I thought about leaving. I had some money saved, enough to get to Missoula maybe, find a real job, rejoin whatever normal life looked like for someone like me, if it looked like anything anymore. But I didn't. I told myself it was the free rent, the easy work, Dale's health, the fact that I genuinely didn't have anywhere else to be, and there's a specific kind of freedom in admitting that. All of that was true. But it wasn't the whole truth. The whole truth is that somewhere between October and July, Ash Creek had stopped being a place I was staying and started being a place I was from, not literally, but structurally, in my routines, in my nervous system. I locked up at 11:30 without checking the clock because my body knew what 11:30 felt like. I could feel midnight approaching the way some people feel rain. Coming a pressure shift, an instinct. I'd stopped noticing the hum, the same way you stop noticing the sound of your own refrigerator. I'd become infrastructure. A few weeks ago, and this is the part I've been circling for this entire time, the reason I'm even talking about any of this. A car pulled into the lot around 11 p.m. Young couple, early 20s maybe, Oregon plates, road trip, heading to Yellowstone, got tired, saw the motel sign from the highway, figured they'd stop for the night. I checked them in. Room 4. Handed them the key. "Windows stay closed at night," I said. Heat can be a little aggressive, but there are extra blankets in the closet." The girl tilted her head. "Why do the windows need to stay closed?" And I smiled. A real smile. Practiced. Warm. The exact same smile Marlo had given me nearly a year ago. The one that said, "I know exactly what you're feeling, and I'm sorry, and there is no version of this explanation that won't make me sound insane. So please just trust me and close the window." "Sounds carry out here," I said. "You'll sleep better." She accepted it. They both did. They went to their room. I watched the light go off at 11:45. I sat at the desk, listened to the quiet settle in, the thickening, the muting, the way the valley held its breath. And I felt something that I want to call peace, but might have been surrender. I don't know what's out there. I want to be honest about that. I never got a clear look. I don't think anyone in Ash Creek has. Not recently, anyway. I never found tracks in the snow, though after heavy storms, I'd sometimes find places in the field where the snow was compressed in long, uneven patches, like something enormous had been resting there for hours, watching the motel, and then simply wasn't there anymore by morning. I never got an explanation. Nobody offered one. The town doesn't have a mythology about it, as far as I can tell. No stories around the campfire, no legends at Marlowe's. It's not something they talk about. It's something they build around, the way a river builds around a rock. The rock doesn't need a name. It just needs to be accounted for. I keep the windows closed now. I don't go outside after midnight. I carry that screwdriver everywhere, and I check latches on rooms I've already checked, because I'm not sure when checking once stopped feeling like enough. And some nights, and this is the part that scares me most, honestly, more than the field, more than the hum, more than whatever circled the building during the blackout. Some nights I catch myself standing at the office window around 12:30, watching the parking lot. Not watching for danger. Watching to see which guests forgot to close their windows. And I feel irritated. Not scared for them. Irritated. The way a parent feels when a kid leaves the back door open in winter. Not angry. Just, don't you know what comes in? That's when I know I'm not passing through Ash Creek anymore. I'm part of it. I'm the woman in the tan Chevy now. I'm Dale wiping the counter. I'm Marlo lowering the blinds without explaining why. I'm the entry in the guest book margin. I'm the porch light that clicks off at 11:30 and stays off until dawn. And if you ever pull off that highway, late at night, too tired to keep driving, and you see the orange neon and the gravel lot, and you think, I'll just stop here for the night. I'll hand you a key. I'll tell you sounds carry out here. And I'll mean it the way everyone in Ash Creek means everything. Carefully, quietly, with the windows shut.